it shows that we may not be on the same wavelength as the basic public. So how do you approach this?
Unfortunately, it's a sort of a tough situation. I understand where you're coming from and agree, but lots of these plans have regular update schedules that need to be followed. These projects can't be implemented unless they're in an approved plan. And like I said, these plans have certain update schedules that need to be followed. So say if a bridge were to be reconstructed and part of that bridge construction was installing some security cameras on the bridge or some variable message signs on the bridge, we want to be able to do that work in coordination with that bridge work, unless we did this ITS update. So it's, and unfortunately it's something that needs to be done, though we do have other things that need to be done at the same time. We just need more funding to get it all done.
When you say it needs to be done, do you mean in order to get the rest of the federal funding to complete the job? Is that what you mean? That it needs to be done? Like you said, things are on schedule, so they have to be done. How do you mean that?
Let me do it, please. Okay, so in order for a project to be funded, it has to be in a plan. And the plan has to be properly noticed. It has to be, if it's a non-attainment for air, it has to have a budget and be compliant. It has to be fiscally constrained. These are all things that Congress has put into the Surface and Transportation Act so that you respond to that. So these are the parameters of how a project goes forward. It's the process that's used. The ITS isn't just those messaging boards. If you looked at how the communities were preparing for the Hurricane Irene, all the messaging boards in the state were out being used as emergency preparation for Hurricane Irene. If there's a plan in place, one of the big aspects of this is emergency management on the Little Bay bridges, particularly due to the construction. And so there's a whole plan in place, incident management plan in place, that uses a lot of this intelligent transportation systems to manage what you do with an accident and which lane it occurs and what time of the day, and does it have hazard materials, like is it a propane tank? So all of this is structured, and the ITS is part of this system that runs all of these different types of plans. So it's the computers and the technology that go into place to make traffic flow work and be safer and keep throughput capacity and manage when there's situations where the system goes down because of an accident or a spill. So that's a lot of what they do. A lot of it is also looking at the tolling and managing the peaks of the issues with 4th of July and Labor Day and Saturdays, changeover in Maine on the cottages during the summer. It has a lot to do with that. Traffic flow during peak hours on commercial streets like Central Ave and Dover. Managing the signalization so that the traffic flows smoothly, there's less generation of ozone, all of those factors. It's into every component of what we do in transportation, every aspect.
I think a big part of the initial reason we started doing ITS is 9/11, is that Homeland Security kind of initiative, and thought maybe you can go into the ITS a little bit more, but that a lot of it happened in response to recognition that we have all this technology and we don't have any on our highways that's helping us deal with it. Any incidents that happen, any safety issues, making sure traffic's flowing at an optimal level, and that's what that's for. I think right now is a big time to catch up, trying to get all that stuff in place because it hasn't been there before, and now it can be there. And once we're really caught up, which I think we're doing a pretty good job with in the Hampshire. I don't know if the investment's going to be as large in ITS, but it'll be an ongoing investment, but it won't be as significant as it has been in the past 10 years, I'd say.
Thank you.
Okay, any further comments on the intelligent transportation system? Moving right along to an update on the park and ride study, the toolkit. You're up again, Mark.
Yep. All right, so I printed out the scope of work for the toolkit, the application that we sent in. This project is in an effort to basically create some kind of guidance for park and rides in general, best practices for setting them up, design, types of features that need to be there, agreements with communities, with DOT, dealing with legal liability issues. There's a lot of guidance that just does not exist in New Hampshire right now, and we're working together to try to get the guidance in place so that projects for park and rides can move forward more smoothly. Towns can actually have steps to take if they want to have a park and ride in their community. And it's really, it's an interesting project so far. We've had one meeting with our full group, our steering committee. We are going to be selecting a community to work with to do a case study for a park and ride, basically go through the whole design process for the park and ride, do some concept designs using the guidance that we create in this toolkit that we're making. So thus far, we're in the first phase of it. We're basically collecting data, setting up our committees, finding potential communities to work with on the case study, and creating an outline for the toolkit so that we can start filling in the information about how to develop a park and ride. A few weeks ago, I was able to go out and review all the park and rides, took an inventory of all the park and rides, both state run and local park and rides in our region. I took pictures, I made a matrix of types of accommodations that the park and rides have. Do they have lighting? Do they have cameras? Do they have electricity, water, bathroom? So going through and really taking an in-depth inventory, putting that together, also noting the average daily traffic on the roads. So we've been putting together quite a bit of information. We will be having our second steering committee meeting in November. It's a pretty exciting project. And I guess somewhat unrelated, this picture here, or potentially related, we have Laurel Cox from Lee contacted me in July about the Calioris family's property, which is right in this area, between the Walgreens, which is down here, and the Wentworth Douglas establishment in Lee. So this is Lee Traffic Circle, this is 125 going north from the traffic circle, and down here we have Route 4. So the landowners here are interested in creating a park and ride or using some of their land for a park and ride. This project is part of the record of decision for the Little Bay Bridges. A 30 to 50 spot park and ride is included in that project, so there's funding set aside at this point for some work on this. This is a pretty nice location. The transit providers in our region are pretty happy, would be pretty happy if it was in this location. There's an existing access road here off of Route 4 that comes up behind. The permits for the wetland permits are already in place to build this extension of the roadway to connect up with Wentworth Douglas. And this is a signalized intersection up here for Market Basket and Wentworth Douglas, which is something they also prefer. This park and ride is also a nice location because it gets traffic away from the circle. The buses will be able to go away from the circle, and people using the park and ride wouldn't necessarily need to go through the circle we all probably know there's a roundabout being planned as a highway safety improvement project for the circle because they have safety issues and long stacking distances. So pretty excited about this. I got in contact with Keith Coda, who's the project manager for the Little Bay Bridge project. We went down to Concord last week to sit down and have a preliminary discussion with them about next steps. Chester Murch, the acting town administrator of Lee, and also their chief of police was down there with us. They're pretty excited about that. And we had a selectman also from Lee down there. So our next steps with this are working with the Corey Calioris family to come up with some preliminary design drawings for what they hope to do with this piece of land. They have about 30 acres, I believe, that extend back to the Oyster River. This is prime real estate right here that they're hoping to develop into a restaurant, a gas station, maybe some kind of supermarket. But I guess our view is, and also the town of Lee, we like these access points on 125 would be ideal if they're eliminated and they could access it to the access road. So that would reduce some of the conflict points on 125. So that's just a, yeah.
When you're looking at building a park and ride, what data do you use to determine how many spots you're going to need?
Well, we don't have a system in New Hampshire, so that's going to be part of the park and ride study is how you figure out how many spots you need, how much demand there might be. Dover, we only wanted to put in, or the initial plan was to put in 250 spots. We got about 450 spots, and it's 90% full every day. So we don't have a great system in place for estimating the amount of use it's going to get. What I can tell you is this 125 gets about 20,000 cars a day, and Route 4 in this area gets about 18,000 cars a day. So, yeah, I thought it was lower. Chet Rich informed me that it was higher, around 18 and a half per day. So there's significant traffic on this road. UNH is starting a bus service that is going to go from Durham out to Lee, up to Rochester on 125, so this would be a great pickup spot for them. I guess that's where we're at.
The market basket parking lot, you see that is used a lot by park and ride folks.
Yep.
Parking there, it's illegally. And it used to be the Sugar Shack, which is just off the bottom here, which is now the IBEW.
This area?
No.
It's
Going north.
Up the road.
Further out, it's west.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was,
Yeah.
I mean, west.
Used to be park and ride too, that had pretty good use until it converted over.
What are all those poles? What are all those telephone poles? They put up like
Yeah.
30 poles.
Do all state-owned park and rides have to have a public transportation too?
I don't believe so. I don't think there's any standards in New Hampshire for park and rides. And our toolkit is more of a guidance for best practices also. Like we don't expect in, let's say, up on Route 2 in northern New Hampshire that there's going to be transit service on a park and ride up there to have a park and ride. But we're trying to make guidance for that kind of, pick your adventure from a menu of different things. Your town's this size and the road has this many cars going on it, transit service in the region. These are the kinds of accommodations you want to build, but also have it so it can be shrunk down to, the smaller needs. And, provide guidance for that, if there's a church in the area that wouldn't mind using its parking lot for a parking ride during the daytime, how do they deal with those liability issues, kind of a comprehensive guidance for a number of different scenarios, or as many as we can do through this study, so.
Okay, anything further on the park and ride study? Okay, thank you, Mark. Moving right along to project update. Project updates. Dan.
Okay, yeah, I have a few things I just want to update the policy committee about. Let's see, last fall, I believe some of you attended a presentation by the Census Bureau about 2010 urban area delineations. Now This was a major concern in our region because